Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Kirsten and I am one half of a Christian jazz pop duo named Zoetic. We strive to write creative music about important issues in the culture from a Christian worldview. But we also are going to start making these videos on this channel about the Christian entertainment industry as well. So Christian music, Christian movies, Christian TV shows. There's going to be more content like this in the future, and we'd encourage you to subscribe to the channel to get those future videos, as well as to check out our music. Like, we don't just want to critique culture or expose culture. We want to create culture as well. Our previous video was about the Chosen and the pride flag whole thing. I'm not going to rehash that. I did that already. I think I responded to pretty much every objection that Dallas Jenkins had made. And so if you want to go check out that video, you can do so at the link above. This video is not going to be about that. This is a part 2, but this is what I'd like to talk about instead is why there have been so many YouTubers or people in the so-called Christian entertainment industry or even conservative entertainment that have defended or downplayed this. Ruslan is, I really was displeased with his response to the whole thing about The Chosen. Candace Owens, who she is in conservative entertainment. She doesn't work for a Christian entertainment company, obviously, but she considers herself a Christian. She had a really bad response to this whole thing, in my opinion. Jeremy Boring had that weird response. He's the CEO of the Daily Wire. He's not a YouTuber himself, really, but he does own a media company. He had kind of a strange response. Even Dallas Jenkins himself, those are the kind of the bigger ones. There have been a lot of other YouTubers or people in the Christian or conservative entertainment with larger platforms that have downplayed this as well. And you may have noticed this and been disappointed with their weak or even completely wrong responses. I know that I was. The general objection, to bring everything back to the general objection that most Christians had, was this: there shouldn't be a pride flag that takes pride in what God directly calls sinful in the promo footage for a show about the life of Jesus. That was our point. That was the simple main point. But if you've noticed, a lot of these people that I mentioned, they haven't stayed on that point. They really haven't directly engaged with it. They keep trying to shift the point, and they keep trying to shift the point from a moral point to a business point. And so that's what I want to talk about today, because some of the things I've heard these people say are, The Chosen is not really a Christian show. It's not a ministry. I addressed that in the previous video, but in this industry, people hire people with all sorts of different beliefs. It's just kind of how it's done. I've even heard that you have to do that. You have to because you can't discriminate. Candace Owens said that it's small-minded to say that you have an objection to this, that the people who have objections don't know how business works.
And if your answer to all of that is yes, then I have to tell you that you have a very immature business mind.
Multiple of these people have said that they have people, crew of all different beliefs working on their show. So this is not a big deal. So they keep trying to shift to this point. Just kind of all different sides of the same point of, this is just going to happen in the industry. Like, this is kind of how it is. So that's what I want to address today. And these statements that are being made still do not directly address the main objection. Why is there a pride flag in official promo footage? But I already talked about that main point, and so I'd like to discuss this question instead that I think gets a little bit deeper. It gets more to the root of things, which is, should Christians in the entertainment industry, okay, not just Christians in the entertainment industry, but Christians in the entertainment industry that make explicitly faith-based entertainment, which is what I would consider The Chosen to be, or maybe they have a Christian podcast or things of that nature. Should they be working with non-Christians? Do they have to legally? And why is this being defended so much? So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about The Chosen's fatal error. And in my opinion, this fatal error happened long before we saw the pride flag on set. Now, the pride flag on set is bad. I've said that many, many times. I hold to that. It's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, but it didn't really start from that. I mean, Dallas Jenkins made it very clear in his rebuttal video that The Chosen is not a nonprofit. It's not a 501c3. It's not a religious organization, and therefore it's not a ministry.
We are not a church. We are not a nonprofit. We're not a ministry. We're not any kind of religious or political organization.
That was his rationalization. Rather, it's a for-profit company. So I hate to get all businessy, but I feel like this is very, very important, that there's important things to be said here. So first of all, obviously there are for-profit companies and then there are nonprofit companies. Nonprofit companies are also known as 501c3s. There is a specific subset of nonprofit companies that are called religious organizations. Title VII defines religious organizations as institutions whose purpose and character are primarily religious. My argument is that the chosen should have chosen, no pun intended, in the beginning to be considered a religious organization, not a for-profit company. They should have classified themselves as a 501c3, specifically as a religious organization, not as a for-profit company. And I'm going to get into that. Why? Why would I say that? Well, first of all, in my opinion, that's what they are definitionally. It's a religious show completely about the life of Jesus. We talked before about how it's very missional, how they crowdfunded Christians. Dallas Jenkins considers himself a Bible-believing Christian. They've sold devotionals, and I've talked before how they have a ministry whether they will admit it or not. You have a religious mission, you have a religious ministry, okay? So definitionally, it seems like religious organization would be the easiest thing to define themselves as. Why would that be good? Religious organizations, the specific subset of 501c3s, can choose to only hire people who share their religious beliefs, okay? They have an exemption under Title VII law. They don't have to only hire people who share their religious beliefs, but they can choose to do that. So for instance, a Christian school can choose to only hire Christians. I think there's even Lutheran schools that can choose to only hire Lutherans, which is a specific subset, right? A Baptist church can choose to not just only hire Christians, but only hire Baptists. They can say in the hiring process, you don't seem to follow our belief system, or you don't agree to our belief system, so we aren't going to hire you. And I would assume if they hire someone who claims their belief system, but later openly rejects the belief system, they could fire that person if they're a religious organization. And so why would this be good for the chosen to do? Well, first of all, like I said, by definition, they seem to be a religious organization, in my opinion. But also because they could have chosen, if they wanted, to only hire Christians, and that would have been legal to do. And if you do that, you avoid a lot of the stuff. You avoid the actors coming out and basically more or less attacking their own fans. I understand that one of the actors apologized for that. I appreciate that, but it happened with two of the other actors as well. You likely avoid the whole pride flag controversy in the first place, right? You have people working with you who really understand your mission and really want to evangelize the world. I talked about the early church and how it's important that the early church was made up of Christians, of course. Sometimes new Christians, but Christians were the ones evangelizing. So now it begs the question, why didn't the chosen, from the very beginning, classify themselves as a religious organization? They didn't classify themselves as a nonprofit. They said they're a for-profit company. They classified themselves as something else. So I don't know the answer for sure, and I can't accuse them of anything, and I'm not going to do that. This is conjecture, okay? But here's what I will say in general. A reason why someone may not want to classify themselves as a religious organization is monetary. There's a monetary reason. I'm not saying that this is for sure the reason the chosen did what they did. I don't know, but a reason could be about money. For instance, it says to be tax exempt under section 501c3, an organization must not be serving any private interests, including the interests of the creator's family, shareholders of the organization, other designated individuals, or other persons controlled by private interests. None of the net earnings, this is important, none of the net earnings of the organization can be used to benefit any private shareholder or individual. All earnings must be used solely for the advancement of its charitable cause. People employed by the organization must be paid reasonable compensation, which is based on the fair market value that the job function requires. But what does that mean? That's a bunch of fancy language to basically mean, I've seen it even said, the net earnings cannot be used to enrich the founders. The other thing is, do nonprofit organizations have shareholders? An article says the answer to that is simple and clear: no. In fact, no one can claim possession of a nonprofit, so they must pass organizational and operational tests in order for the IRS to recognize their tax exempt status. Without an owner, they cannot issue stock. This is important. So in business, most people probably know this, but stock is how much ownership you have of the company. And if you sell the company later, let's just say I had a company and I owned 50% of the stock, 50% of the company, and I sold it later for $2 million. We sold it later for $2 million. Well, because I own 50% of the stock, in this simple example, I would get $1 million in the sale of that. So nonprofits, religious organizations, 501c3s cannot issue stock and have no way to offer dividends. Even the founder has no ownership rights, yet typically serves on the initial board of directors to play a major role in the decision-making process. Okay, so this is a reason why someone would maybe not want to classify themselves as a religious organization or a 501c3. There was an intentional decision to not make it a nonprofit, to not make it a 501c3, to not make it a religious organization. As of 2022, I believe Dallas Jenkins owns 44% of the equity in The Chosen. Okay, it might be a little less at this point. I don't know. That's a lot of money. That's worth a lot of money. Angel Studios, which again, now The Chosen has a deal with Lionsgate, but they anticipated a whopping $2.5 billion in revenue for the remaining seasons. Okay, so if you're anticipating $2.5 billion in revenue and you own 44% of that company, you are going to be a very, very, very wealthy person if that company is sold. In 2021, The Chosen obtained venture capital funding from Elon Musk's company GigaFund for $47 million.
A VC, a venture capital group, GigaFund, which is actually Elon Musk's venture capital group, awarding $47 million to Angel Studios. And I said, wait a second here. I thought they were nonprofit. And so I started to look into this.
I did not find out if nonprofits can get venture capital funding. Maybe they can. But my point in saying that last thing is to say that The Chosen is still crowdfunding. Like, they're still doing their pay it forward thing, okay? They're still doing that. And they raised $47 million. Here are the facts. I'm going to summarize it. The Chosen sells multi-millions dollars of merch on top of still crowdfunding, on top of a $47 million investment, on top of a Lionsgate deal. They were projected to make $2.5 billion, okay, by Angel Studios. Dallas Jenkins owns stock. They have shareholders. They have equity, okay? So that is, make of that what you will. What I'm trying to say is that at least some of it would not be possible if they were a nonprofit. So before we get too far in, I do want to say I don't think it's necessarily wrong or sinful to make a good living. I don't think that people working in ministry need to be poor or need to starve or whatever. That would be hypocritical if I said that, okay? That being said, the Bible warns again and again that a lot of money can corrupt, that money in general can corrupt, and that the more money you have, the more potential there is for corruption. I want to read some verses. Mark 10:23, Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard is it for the rich to enter the kingdom of God?" Mark 6:24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Again, nothing wrong in principle with making a decent living or even a good living. But the more money, in high levels of affluence, the more potential for corruption. Matthew 13:22. And on the one whom the seed was sown among the thorns, this is the man who hears the word, and the worry of the world and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. 1 Timothy 6:8-9. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. And Proverbs 28:11. The rich are wise in their own eyes. One who is poor and discerning sees how deluded they are. So I talked first about the fact that the Chosen does not consider themselves a nonprofit. Therefore, does not consider themselves a religious organization. I talked about the potential reason why a company may not want to be a nonprofit. If you are a for-profit company, so you are not a 501c3, you are not a nonprofit, you are not a religious organization, you no longer get the religious exemption under title law. And this is what Candace Owens was talking about when she said, you cannot discriminate hiring or firing someone based on their faith. You can't, in the interview process, likely ask a lot of questions about people's religious beliefs.
Did you think that when they were hiring this individual to work on the show, they were able to ask him what his viewpoints were? Do you think that when you hire people, you can say, okay, so where's the last place you worked? Okay, are you gay? Are you like into gay stuff? Like, do you like gay stuff? Are you like a homo? Are you like into that? No, of course you are not allowed to do that. Again, these are not questions that you are not allowed to ask a person.
Unlike a 501c3 religious organization specifically, you could get sued. You could get sued for discrimination. You could get sued easily. Okay, The Chosen is a for-profit company. This is why I believe that Dallas Jenkins keeps doubling down. He's painted himself into a corner, is what I'm trying to say. Okay? And when things like the pride flag thing happen, you're now terrified, because you're a for-profit company, of getting sued. If you fire the person, which most Christians were not suggesting, but if you fire the person, you might get sued. Even if you just ask them to put the flag away, you could get sued, right? And that seemed to be kind of what he was getting at. And so this is the corner you paint yourself into when morally you are a religious organization, you make a show about Jesus, you're using it for gospel evangelism, but legally you are a for-profit company. This is the issue that you get. So in the previous video, I already addressed the Solomon had pagans help him build the temple thing. I already did that in the previous video. But let me ask this. Let's take a step back. Was the early church built by non-Christians? It was often built by new Christians, of course, early Christians, but non-Christians, pagans. The early church was built by people who converted to Christianity. And even then, Paul had a lot of things to say to them. But non-Christians, people who rejected the gospel, did not build the early church. This is always what I compared the Chosen to more. I've noticed that in general, a lot of the Christian YouTubers, people in media that have defended this, have large amounts of influence, large amounts of subscribers, and they openly admit that non-Christians work on their shows. Candace admitted this. Ruslan admitted this. So why? Let's bring it back. I think that there's two reasons. First of all, I think, like I said, and I can't directly accuse, but there are in general monetary reasons to be a for-profit company, not a nonprofit, not a 501c3, not a religious organization. And if you are a for-profit company, you are subject to title law and can't choose to hire or not hire based on religious beliefs. Okay, you could get sued. Again, Candace Owens said as much. Now, this doesn't invalidate the main point, because I'm pretty sure if Candace, if one of her camera operators pulled out a pride flag and put it in the footage while she was giving a monologue, so like on camera, she probably wouldn't be cool with that. I will say that Candace Owens is not making a show about Jesus. She is a conservative commentator. She does identify as a Christian, but she is not, it's not the same thing as The Chosen. Like the Daily Wire is not and should not be considered a religious organization. That's not my point, but I want to bring it back. I still thought her response was not good, but I don't know if it's wise for openly Christian YouTubers, entertainment companies, film companies, whatever, to classify themselves morally as a Christian ministry, but legally as a for-profit company. Because now you can't only hire Christians, and things like this situation, the pride flag situation, happen more and more, where eventually the message is compromised. Now, there is one more reason as to why some of these shows want to hire non-Christians that I haven't even discussed at all. The second reason is that they hire from Hollywood, and they don't believe that they could find Christians to do a better job. And I think part of this comes from the fact that we grew up with Christian media, Christian movies. I won't name any of them. You know what they are. Some of them have songs named after them, maybe. But we grew up with these Christian movies that maybe were not that well produced, that were cheesy. And so it's like, well, we don't feel like Christians can make good work. And so we should, it's not even that we have to hire non-Christians. We should go to Hollywood. We should, poach talent off of that. And I have a friend who works in media for a large Christian podcast. I do not want to throw her under the bus because I really like this person. I asked her about this, and when I asked her about the whole Chosen thing, she said, I agree, it's probably not wise to hire non-Christians if you were working in Christian entertainment. We would prefer our show was only like-minded people because that keeps people passionate about it. But I don't think they, meaning Christian entertainment companies, go out of their way to hire non-believers. I just think they try to find excellent people in the industry, and most of those are sadly not usually Christians. Okay, so this, again, is not to throw her under the bus, but this is the attitude that is in the industry. There's just this belief that Christians couldn't do as good of a job. I do think that coming from other Christians, that can easily cross the line into insulting. Again, I understand kind of where you're getting the sentiment from, but I don't know, maybe you have to work harder to find them. Maybe they don't have the Hollywood pedigree. Maybe they don't have the resume. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't be used for the kingdom of God. You could at least try to hire Christians or people who share your worldview, but again, that becomes very legally tricky if you are not classified as a religious organization. What is the moral of this whole video? I think the moral of the story is this. The Chosen portrayed themselves one way when they were crowdfunding and another way legally. In crowdfunding, they constantly talked about the mission and evangelism and the gospel and the ministry and the show reaching people and all this stuff. Meanwhile, they were hiring non-Christians, not just as the cameramen, and not just as the actors, but in high positions in the company. I mentioned before in the previous video that Brad Pello, the president of The Chosen, is a Mormon, and that as an Orthodox sola scriptura Christian, I do not believe that Mormonism falls within the orthodoxy of Christian belief. They legally shot themselves in the foot because they don't classify themselves as a religious ministry and organization. And so when a lot of Christians felt betrayed by what happened, they should have. Because what was being said up front and what was being done legally seemed to be in conflict with each other. I kind of like to call this ends justify the means Christianity. So it's like, if the product is amazing, then whatever we had to do to get there, we had to do. But I don't think that that's necessarily right or that that's biblical. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is this. When we are trying to build the kingdom of God, we work with Christians to evangelize non-Christians. We shouldn't primarily work with non-Christians to evangelize. And I want to read this verse, and it's really important. And I know people may think this is about marriage only. I don't think so. I don't think this is only in the context of marriage. You probably know what I'm about to read. 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? I love this commentary on gotquestions.org. I'm going to read it. The unequal yoke is often applied to business relationships. For a Christian to enter into a partnership with an unbeliever is to court disaster. Unbelievers have opposite worldviews and morals, and business decisions made daily will reflect the worldview of one partner or the other. For the relationship to work, one or the other must abandon his moral center and move towards that of the other. More often than not, it is the believer who finds himself pressured to leave his Christian principles behind for the sake of profit and the growth of the business. Wow. Okay. And obviously this verse can be applied to marriage as well, but not only marriage. I think what I just read is kind of what happened sadly to The Chosen in a nutshell. Compromise after compromise after compromise was made because you're working with unbelievers. And then one of the unbelievers' agenda came out in official footage, and that's what caused this to happen. And so that is what I want to say, okay? That is the main point, is that I believe the mistake was made long before the pride flag showed up, that the pride flag was just the bad fruit of the bad root. All right, thank you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe, and of course, comment on the video as well if you have input to give. We're going to continue making videos about the Christian entertainment industry. We're probably going to move more into music because that's what we do. Please check out our music. It's all over our page. We hope that our music blesses you guys. All right, bye.